Good morning and welcome everyone. Hope everyone had fun last night. Today we are going to talk about something that is reshaping how organizations approach AI, synthetic data. As if you haven't heard about data maker and synthetic data in this conference, but this is going to be a governance take on it. How can we make sure that we are governing this synthetic data revolution in a correct way so that we are building systems that are trustworthy and responsible? AI adoption isn't theoretical anymore. It is already everywhere. But at the same time, data is always the big bottleneck. Definitely, we have seen productivity gains. Now we are going to see some ROI changes, ROI helping. But there is still this problem where organizations are still struggling to share data or afford data collection or meet regulatory requirements. So the question becomes, how do we fuel this AI responsibly without breaking privacy, trust, or budgets? So let's start. Every team needs data to make their models more accurate, more bias-free, etc. Example, if a bank is trying to train a model to catch money laundering, they might see only a suspicious handful transactions per year, but they need thousands of those to train a reliable model. Or, for instance, consider a public health agency which is trying to distribute resources in an equitable way, but they have very minimal citizen data that is available that could be of use, right? So demand of data is growing exponentially, but our ability to collect and share is not there yet. The core tension, AI is hungry for data, but the most valuable data that can be of greatest use is generally more sensitive. In finance, I just mentioned anti-money laundering, where banks cannot share transaction data across borders. In healthcare, rare disease research stalls because patient cohorts are tiny and spread across institutions, so they cannot share data legally. In public sector, agencies are sitting on valuable census data or benefits data that they cannot open up for analytics without risking citizen privacy. So how do we innovate responsibly and yet fuel this growth for data? That's where our wonderful synthetic data comes into picture, and the promise is super compelling. What if you could generate data that looks and behaves like the real thing, but doesn't contain a real person's information, right? So let's explore. Setting the stage and defining certain definitions here, what synthetic data is and what it isn't, right? So synthetic data, you might have seen models get trained on real data set, they learn patterns, distribution, and they generate new record. It's a simple way of describing synthetic data, right? But you have to keep in mind that anonymized data is not synthetic data. That's the more. Now, when synthetic data done right, it can unlock collaboration. Teams can share data without exposing sensitive records, move faster, fill in the gaps that real data doesn't cover well, like rare events. That is why it has become so attractive in regulated industry, global organizations, and cross-border use cases. Let's talk the elephant in the room, the risks of using synthetic data. So it's not like a magic wand that is going to be resolving all your problems. For example, if your original lending data reflects decades of redlining, your synthetic data will too. A hospital system that generates synthetic patient records from a data set that is underrepresenting certain demographics will build models that fail those same communities. So we need to talk honestly about the risk before we get too excited about this promise. As developers, someone might say, oh, AI governance, governing this, building responsibility, is it my responsibility? Or is it like a policy level discussion? I would say that it is a socio-technical discussion, and in that, the practitioners like us can bring and use technology to make sure that we are building this in a right way. So what are some of the risks of synthetic data? Number one, bias in source data. It's a very common trap in finance. If historical data reflects decades of discriminatory underwriting, your synthetic data will. Then there is governance. And this is where most organizations are still figuring things out. Who owns the synthetic data? Who validates it before it gets used in downstream and used in production? Privacy, of course, is a real concern if you are not putting in place things like PII removals or differential privacy. There is a risk of re-identifying the original data value. Of course, we have inference prediction mismatch, where it does well on your real data, but it fails to build the same accuracy models on the synthetic one. And there might be, while you're generating this synthetic data, you might lose some of the rare but critical events that are actually essential for solving the problem that you're building the model for. So these are some of the risks that could be handled at the practitioner level, and we'll dive deep into how. Now, so there are some tips and tricks that I'm going to share today, what you can do before you even hit that generate button for your synthetic data, because it's super easy using SAS Data Maker to generate synthetic data. So just prepping you on how we can govern them before you generate it, right? So some of the steps that I'm going to showcase here are, now the prep work that separates a useful synthetic data from a liability are, if you are a data engineer, you are a data scientist, you can potentially use this as a checklist or something that you have to keep in mind before you generate your synthetic data. Starting with data preparation, statistical profiling, always a good practice to run distribution, check correlation, flagging missing values, outliers. In finance, that means you're profiling your transaction tables. Are there any nulls in the income field? Is it skewed to a certain zip code? Next, something that I like is bias inventory. I like this word very much. This is about identifying those protected and proxy attributes in your source data before they get baked into synthetic records, right? So how can I make sure as a developer to identify it beforehand, even before it builds your model, right? Then you can define the quality validation metrics upfront. Don't wait until the generation to figure out what good looks like or what best synthetic data looks like, right? And finally, privacy and security measures, differential privacy parameters. It's in the hands of the practitioners like us to make sure we are picking the right differential privacy parameters. We are doing our job of PII removal, in some cases PII masking, etc. This is table stake, but implementation details do matter. For example, a data engineer, they can decide exact epsilon values for their differential privacy. PII removal isn't just stripping name and SSN. It is also about catching that quasi-identifiers like rare diagnosis plus age location combos in healthcare, or unique transaction patterns in financial data that could re-identify someone. So these are some of the things that you could do. In the next two slides, I'm going to showcase how some of the things that we can do currently in SAS Data Maker and in SAS Viya, once you bring that data into SAS Viya to build your responsible synthetic data end-to-end pipeline, right? So let's dive into the demo. So this is our wonderful product, SAS Data Maker, and governance start at the project level. So I don't have to figure out, okay, where did I generate it? Where did I keep it? So you can create a project. It's a great practice if you could describe the intended use of that particular data that you are generating. So I put that in my project description there. I have wonderful information about when it was created, how many models it was running. Once I click into it, I analyze the structures and column of that synthetic data, and I will see that, oh, if there is a presence of any PII information which I need to take care of. Oh, I see that, oh, this is a last name value. I might not include that in training. So there is an option for that as well. I can go ahead and also do the semantic type selection before even I train that synthetic data if I decide I need to include the last names in my data table. So once I have done that, I can, this is my first step in ensuring what I'm doing around privacy. I did something about governance by entering the project description. Then I checked my PIIs. If I want to keep it in my training or remove it, then I did semantic type. The third thing that I can do for privacy is I will select whether I want to use differential privacy or not. So differential privacy will add some noise in your synthetic data, which will make it difficult to go back or reverse engineer to find the original data set. Once I do that, we have multiple options for the models that we can select. In here, I am selecting prive base. This is the epsilon level decision that a data engineer can take, whether I am considering more accuracy or privacy is my concern. And all these wonderful metrics that I'm defining about the quality of the data set when it is generated. So density disclosure, presence disclosure, how is my histogram similarity doing with original data set, is it of any use or not? So all that wonderful graphical information gets generated when we are training that model. Now, I have hit the train button here. It is training that model on the parameters that I selected. It gave me this single snapshot of how similar that data is, whether the density disclosure is high, meaning how easy it is to re-engineer to the original data set. I look at the synthetic type samples. That means I'm validating the quality of that data set. And once I am okay with that, I will just hit generate that, and I can select multiple file types, which is table stakes here now. It is starting to generate that data. Now, it was so simple, right, to generate the synthetic data. There are certain governance tips and tricks that we can do. Number one, like I said, the intended use is must, so that it can go downstream and one can have that audit trail about why this data was generated in one place. Then on the top right corner over here, it shows you a particular date, particular time of when that model was trained. That is very essential. And in SAS Data Maker, you can select out of, you might have trained tens of models by changing different parameters that is suiting your particular use. So you can select which model you want to generate the synthetic data. So that decision is, again, the human in the loop. You can decide which one based on the metrics that you have designed. So once the generation is complete, it gives you, obviously it is easier to just download the file, use it wherever, in whichever environment you want. This is the governance type I was talking about. I can name each and every model, what time. I will look at those evaluation summary scores, making sure that, if I am comfortable with each model or not, and then I just generate whichever I want. Now, these are some of the things that I did as a data engineer in Data Maker, how to use it in a responsible way. Now, once you have the data and I bring it in SAS Viya, there are certain steps that I can. In this particular example, what I'm doing is I'm going to take one data set where I have applied no differential privacy. I am going to look at its distribution, how it is distributed. I'm going to look at its information privacy details, and all the other wonderful data governance detail that could be done right now in our SAS information catalog. And I'm going to build a data model. I'm going to predict the income greater than 50K for that particular individual. And then once that is done, I'm going to take one more essential step where I'm going to check fairness and bias in SAS Model Studio to make sure that I am not propagating or amplifying the bias that might already be present. So let's take a look at it. I am in SAS information catalog. I took that data maker data output and I registered that in my information catalog. Once I've registered that, I run the analysis and all these analysis is automatically done. You see the wonderful information that it gives me on the left top side saying that, hey, this data is sensitive. So that is my first red flag there. So I need to be very careful with data set. And then it gives a generic description or a summary. And it has given this free text form where I can input each and every detail of how this synthetic data was generated, what was the epsilon value, and why it should be used. So that I can do. And then on the center, you can see that there are these options around semantic type selection and the information privacy. One of the important things of governance I would like to highlight here is the business glossary, or you can add terms to it. So that means that I got this synthetic data into my environment. I need to make sure that I am cataloging it in a way which I can find it later, I can govern it nicely. So I can use something called as terms, and I can assign a term to it. And whenever I have to ask, if someone asks me questions, okay, how many data sets that you have PII concerns or whatnot. So that is easier to find. The other thing that I just did was I flagged this data set saying that, hey, this data set is sensitive. So whoever is using that, please be careful and please run the appropriate bias checks when you're using that. So that was easily done. I have myself who is designated contact, but you can involve the responsible stakeholders. Now the tagging functionality becomes very important where you can tag the data sets, and as synthetic data, you can give as much as information saying that, hey, this one is the data set where I have not used differential privacy. Okay, I've done that. About the documentation part of it, I come to the column analysis. Again, this is generated automatically. I can see that some of my variables have outliers. Information catalog can also give you information about if they are correlated variables. If there are correlated variables, again, it is a signal to you that, okay, I need to do more analysis if it's a proxy variable or not. There are ways in which you can leave notes at a column level as well to any of the downstream users saying that, hey, you need to check for outliers. You need to be careful while using this data, right? And obviously, the metadata measures kind of covering the information privacy format and the basic table stake data science. And the data quality measures, again, help us to understand if there are any gaps in my data set. For example, I just select a race variable here. I just wanted to see if my data is distributed equally. Clearly, I can see that it is not. So I know that, and I keep that in mind, and then I go back and generate my model. I just hop over to my build model, which is a SAS model studio. And before that, there is one more governance functionality over here in information catalog is the lineage. Now, lineage become very important when, especially with synthetic data, to know, okay, how my data is being used downstream. Who is using it? Is it used for a model studio project? Is someone building models? Is someone using it for exploratory analysis? So treat your synthetic data as your regular data and apply all the governance practices that you would for a normal data set. So that you can be assured that you have all the things that are in place in case you have to show your work. Then I go in my model studio. Remember, I'm using the data set which has no differential privacy. We saw that the race variable has not been is distributed unequally. So that's why I am also making sure that I run assess for bias and before running that model. It is so simple to just select your variable that you would want to assess for bias, and I run my pipeline. I go to my champion model, challenger model, whatever I would. The one thing that I would want to check here is obviously our accuracy and the table stakes metrics that we would, but also the fairness and bias tab, which gives you information about whether your model is biased or not. And clearly, you see this, the prediction bias parity, you can see that there is some bias present. I go to my race variable there, and I see that I have unequal bars for that, and there is an explanation of all these graphs on the help icon there, so it makes it easier for a non-technical audience to understand these graphs as well. So once that is done and I saw that there's bias, okay, I don't care about it anymore, I'll just deploy my model into production. So it's super easy. I'll just register my model into my model manager, and it creates an automatically generated model card. Now, this is a great functionality that, again, I would encourage our SaaS users to use it, because it will carry all the information, remember, that you put in information catalog about your tags, your description that you wrote about your data summary. It will give you the fairness variables, the sensitive variable information. It will give you space where you can write the intended use of this model, limited use cases, etc. So you can see this fairness variables data. It is actually pulled from the information catalog. You can see there is a free text section where you can write whatever the model use cases, limitations, etc. This is the information that, remember, we did it in information catalog. I tagged it as synthetic data, and over here it has carry forward that information. So that is very important that you do your data step correctly. Now, it has also information saying that, oh, this data set is actually not using differential privacy, or this model that I generated is actually based on synthetic data. So that level of information you can tell your end user as well. Again, the fairness metrics over here was 0.13, you would say. And now, what I'm going to do is, I'm not satisfied with this fairness metric. I want to try, I can try bias mitigation, or I can go back to my data maker environment. I will change some parameters. I might play around with my differential privacy. I might do a smooth algorithm, and I will do permutation combination, because it's so easy to generate synthetic data, right? And over here, what I have done is I have done the differential privacy of 0.01. And now if I see the race variable, it is now mostly equally distributed, right? The previous graph that you saw, it had unequal bars. Now let's see, sometimes one might say that it lost the actual information that you were trying to build your data on. That also we can validate in your Model Studio pipeline, if my accuracy is affected so much, or how is my model performing, right? So now I'm going to do, I've run the model with the new data set with differential privacy of 0.01. As a data engineer, it was so easy for me to just go back, change some variables to make sure that my models are not biased. And I can clearly see here the prediction metrics graphs are almost equal there. Again, I just go ahead and I will click my manage model. I can see the wonderful information. Now it says that, oh, this data that is used to build this model is actually using some differential privacy. So again, that information pulled in from your information catalog. And when I go and I see that my bias levels have gone down to 0.02 and not compromising accuracy that much. So it was super easy for me to use synthetic data in a trustworthy way, and it was super easy for me to do this as a data engineer, as a data scientist, just by point and click. So now you just saw a couple of few demos. I'm just going to share some of the tips and tricks that I have found useful when using synthetic data in production. So now this is about from, oh, you know what, we tried synthetic data, to building repeatable, auditable pipelines. Now 4 things matter here. Number 1, governed deployment, making it continuous, right? So this was not a one-off process. You would want to have this process to be deployed in your organization, like for example, a bank who is generating synthetic transaction for fraud modeling, they might have a scheduled pipeline, right? Not a data scientist running a notebook over and over again. Second is your production checklist. Have I done my bias inventory? Have I met my fairness requirements? There were any privacy requirements? Was it easy enough for someone to actually reverse engineer to find the actual data set? Obviously, there is human in the loop, that is table stakes now. Third, building organizational trust. Potentially, you could use data cards, document as much as you can about the data so that that data could be used downstream by users to make sure that they are using it responsibly. Model cards, that is the nutrition label for your model, very important. As you would go to a grocery and check any nutrition label before buying a product, it is getting more and more common these days to have model cards. I would like to plug in one information here. The SaaS Model Manager is releasing their model card lite, wherein you could also get that model card in a shareable format. You can print it as a PDF and share it whenever it is required. And you could do for different models, R, Python, even LLMs at this point. So be on the lookout for that. That would be released in the summer of this year. Now, I just got this wonderful opportunity of using synthetic data. Okay. Now, there are certain things that get unlocked when I have access to this synthetic data. Number one, I can do a lot of counterfactual testing, right, when I've built that model. Previously, it was difficult for me to do that because generating data is expensive. Then it is getting easier for doing the rare event modeling. Then also, privacy preserving federated learning is something that regulated industries might be aware of, which regulatory stress testing can be done easily by the use of synthetic data. It is super easy to do those what if scenarios, right, and making sure that you are building them in a responsible way. So these are some of the tips and tricks that I have come across, but feel free to get in touch and we can continue the conversation. And if you have any question, I can take those now.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, over there.
How do you take care of the bias inventory? So on what criteria you create the inventory for bias?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so that's a great question. So there are different ways in which you could create, like it could be in your data governance pipeline itself, where you are tagging those variables that I showed you at the column level. You can tag those variables and make sure that they are accessible to your end user, saying that, oh, you know what, this actually is potentially a fairness variable or a bias variable. That's how you can create at the data level. At the model level, like I showed you the model card, where it shows you the fairness variables. It will list out all the variables that were tagged for bias checks. So that is how you can do those. There are two different ways in which you can do it for now in SaaS Viya. Yeah.
Very nice presentation.
Thank you.
So how much minimum data do we need to have in order to truly generate synthetic data that maintains the underlying characteristics of the data itself? Because if it is too few, then it's not going to be easy to represent that distribution. So is there a threshold?
Yeah. So there is a wonderful Sundaresh. He is the PM for our SaaS data maker. He is our expert in synthetic data. And I see that he had some answers for you, so I will let him take that.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. It's algorithmically driven. So there isn't a set minimum threshold for training a good synthetic data generator. Most of the times, enterprises are pragmatic. They make do with whatever they have. If you look at it from a statistical point of view, even with about 30 to 50 observations and a decent sized data set, you might get good results if you try to scale them up with synthetic data generation. A lot of other considerations, I mean, if it happens to be a very wide data set or multiple data sets and all of them have very low number of observations, you are obviously going to get into trouble. If your data set happens to be varied and all those different clusters, heterogeneous clusters, do not have adequate representation in your small data set, that's also going to reflect in synthetic data. So I guess it's mostly a question of making do with what you have.
That's absolutely correct, but then we also need to be careful that we don't over-extrapolate and then change the underlying
Yes,
characteristics
exactly.
of the data.
Yes, exactly.
So I think it's a fine balance, and we need
Yes.
to.
And that's where your checks around, say, the accuracy checks that we did or the bias checks that we did, that come in handy. So, yeah.
May you explain better how the fairness indicator has been calculated?
Over there? Okay. So in this particular model card, what we had done was, when I was training the model, I'm a data scientist, I selected certain variables to assess for bias. So my model card knows that information, it just pulls that information from the model studio in SAS Viya and indicates that these are the fairness variables.
Okay, but it's a sort of average of all the bias. It's a sort of average of all the bias.
Yes. So, and I can take your question in depth later, but there are ways in which you could actually quantify the bias, and all those bias metrics explanation is already embedded in Model Studio. So it is easier for an end user who is not technical to understand and quantify that there is bias happening for that particular variable in my model.
I had a follow-up question. So I don't know if you know the answer to this. Is Data Maker available in Viya for learners?
No,
The university version? Yeah.
Not at present.
Okay. Is there any plan of making it available?
There are plans.
Okay, okay.
It was discussed during the roadmap session, so once the recordings come live, we could take a look at that.
Okay.
But we do aim to make Data Maker, or at least the capabilities that are surfaced in Data Maker, available closer to downstream applications that make use of it.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, that'll be fantastic if we can have that available.
So when you started the data maker, I saw the source, right? Where it is coming from source.
Or the input. You can take that. That's fine.
Yeah, so the source data is from your enterprise database.
Okay. So in that context, we are using our original data?
Yes, using your original data, not necessarily the entire dump, but a representative sample of your original data is made available in an input data storage container on Azure, which Data Maker accesses in order to train a model.
Okay. I thought we
Yeah.
are thinking and creating the variables. That is what
Oh,
I'm
no.
thinking.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, in the synthetic data, truly we are eliminating the privacy or just in the sake of for the burden purpose we are creating the synthetic data.
So synthetic data, depending on what differential privacy epsilon value you create, that will determine how much of private that data has become now. So for example, if I go down reducing the values and adding more and more noise to it, then you are essentially preserving the privacy of your original data set. But if you want your data to look exactly same as or exactly similar or closer to your initial data set, then the metrics that I showed you, the density disclosure, the percent disclosure, those will tell you that what is the risk in de-identification. So you might have to go and change your epsilon values accordingly.
When you make a change one variable, we have to redo it all again, push, making synthetic data, then push into information catalog and Model Studio again.
For now, yes, I believe, yeah. So you're saying that if I, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think you can exercise a choice. You typically look at the evaluation metrics for multiple iterations, and at that point in time, synthetic data as such has not been generated. What you have
Yeah.
just train the model. So you take a look at the evaluation metrics for multiple iterations, identify the iteration you're going to go forward with, and only bring that data downstream into information catalog.
Okay.
Yeah. So you will not generate all of the
All the
experiments that you have done. You will take a look at the report that it does, and you will check those, like he said, depending on privacy, histogram, similarity, etc.
So this data maker is the default for SaaS Viya, right? Or it is a separate entity?
It's separate. It's a standalone offering.
Okay.
It's available on the Microsoft Marketplace.
Oh, okay.
It works with Viya.
Oh, okay, okay.
It does not require Viya to run.
Yes.
I got it.
Thank you, Roshali, for this presentation. My name is Abhishek Kumar. I'm an MBA student in business analytics. I'm very new to very new to analytics, so this question might be a little dumb. But when you talk about epsilon value, right? I attended this other presentation, and you kind of showed, like, he kind of played with the epsilon value.
Yes.
And this is where the factor of the privacy versus, like, greater accuracy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of played into effect, right? But also, I wanted to ask you, how do you determine the actual epsilon value? So you're kind of preserving the privacy, but you're also getting greater accuracy. Like,
Yeah.
how do you determine that?
Yes, so for that, I showed an experiment. I was just experimenting as a data scientist. I was like, okay, let me try 0.01. Let me try, and DataMaker has that wonderful UI which shows you that, okay, when you decrease your epsilon values, you are going to get more private data versus you go right side. So I'm doing those experiments, and the training of those models, I then have the ability to compare with those metrics, and I will determine which one I would take.
And then you can just generate afterwards. Right?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
gotcha.
I'll just train it, keep it. You can generate after 10 years if you want.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the presentation. I was wondering, have there been external audits on the quality of the end results? I mean, suppose that some kind of malicious organization tries to use all the resources in the world to rediscover some personal information or something. How likely could it be that it can detect it even though this data has gone through this whole process?
So is the question on, like, if that data is hosted on, like, some cloud providers, and if that has been
yeah, so suppose the synthetic data has been leaked in some way, and people are trying to rediscover the original data. Okay, of course it's quite unlikely because that's the whole idea of this process, but nonetheless, has there been an external audit on the possibility of such a thing happening? I mean, of course, there are all kinds of things that you can parameterize so that you can keep the most synthetic, the least privacy information in the data, but nonetheless.
Yes, so the whole point of using the differential privacy was avoiding those pitfalls, right? So when I'm doing or selecting those epsilon values in a way which I know that it is very difficult to track back to the original, that is the most important step, I would say, to make sure for these privacy risks, even after using synthetic data. But it does come with certain privacy risks, which is reflected in density disclosure metric, which we showed. The more greener the metric, the more assured you are that there won't be any leaks. Do you want to add anything, Sundaresh?
I guess there isn't really an external audit, not one that we have commissioned, but these audits, typically you would expect enterprises to take care of those, commission audit exercises. Oops. Yeah. Okay, so enterprises would commission audit exercises, typically bring it in an outside agency rather than relying on just these metrics. Yeah. There's software that does attack simulations, trying to reverse engineer and identify an original data record from synthetic data. Now, what we have done is we have provided you controls to mitigate the risk of privacy disclosure or data leakage through controls like differential privacy and also certain design decisions, such as when we provide you metrics, we do not even show the original data records on screen, even for comparison purposes, even to the developer of the synthetic data. Mainly because those are places where even a single data point might give away information to a larger compromise. So at our end, we are trying our best to contain the problem. Metrics help in terms of looking at what was the data used to train the model and what sort of privacy risk does it possibly expose. External attacks can get more creative and try and identify an original record from synthetic record, and it's possible that they would succeed. It's all a question of appetite rather than a 1 or 0 decision saying that this entire data set has failed. You look at the results, the end customer enterprises look at the results and then gauge, do I have the appetite to use this going forward? What are realistic scenarios in which such data leakage can actually happen?
Yeah, and that's when having that data governance element, like tagging your data as synthetic data, tagging that differential privacy was used, putting in that description, that helps in all these scenarios so that there is an audit trail for all the synthetic data that has been used in an organization.
Sorry, I had to step out for a bit. I'm not sure whether this question was asked. So is DataMaker a third-party product, or is it integrated with Viya already?
It is a software as a service. It's separate from Viya.
So, like, is it per pop license, or does it come with the enterprise license? Like, say, for example, if I have Viya licenses for 800 users, so is it assumed that, okay, you'll get 800 licenses for Viya, or is just like, for DataMaker?
Yeah. So here's the good news, and the news that is different. Mostly it's good news. DataMaker, the purchase mechanism and model for buying DataMaker, so to speak, is entirely different from Viya. It's a standalone offering. It's available as a software as a service. I'm using software as a service in order to differentiate from SaaS. So it's available on Microsoft Marketplace currently. That's the only place from where you can get it. The idea is that it's deployed as a managed application on your Azure tenant.
Nice.
So all data processing happens within your Azure tenant. It's independent from Viya. Now, when you come to the pricing, nowhere during the process of installing DataMaker do you actually need to encounter a license. So you do not need to talk with a SaaS sales representative. The entire contracting process is carried out by Azure as part of the common marketplace standards. The invoicing occurs on a consumption basis. So you can choose to install DataMaker right now, today. It's quite easy. You have to, of course, have the skills and privileges required to install in your Azure tenant. Once you install it, you can carry out as many iterations as you like. It's only at the final stage when you click on the generate button. That's when we have a single pricing model, $1 per 1,000 rows, 1,000 observations generated. So that's a common pricing model. The idea is that you would engage in multiple iterations before you even decide to take an extract out from DataMaker in order to get satisfied. When you do generate, you generate typically with a small sample, see if it suits your purpose, and then you scale up. So at any point, your initial investment, the money that you put in the till in the first go, that you can actually, you have control over, optimizing that.
Sure. And is Viya a must for DataMaker, or it can be even integrated with SAS 9?
Viya is not a must for DataMaker, and you can use it along with SAS 9 too. And as Vishali demonstrated during the demo, presentation, you can use it with Viya. So the current scenario is we do not integrate DataMaker. It's not that Viya has some built-in capabilities of DataMaker that comes automatically. You can use it along with DataMaker as by using the output of DataMaker or as a data preparation mechanism before sending data over to DataMaker.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more, and then maybe Roshali can wait around and see if anybody has anything else. No? Okay.
Congrats, very good. And I need to know, I want to know now quickly, who are the data makers, competitors in the market? I think it's a new market for this data maker for now, of course. And who is our competitors? Competitors, right?
Competitors for DataMaker or?
Yes, in other solutions that sell this data maker.
Oh yeah, there are certain competitors that are present right now. There is, I think, they are available, again, similar like software as a service options. And we can talk that after the session if you're.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for coming. Let's give a applause. All right. And everybody safe travel.